Welcome to Introduction to Foundation Directory. I'm Caitlin Seifert, the Nonprofit Services Supervisor at the Regional Foundation Center, and I will be leading today's workshop. I'm also a certified Foundation Directory expert and trainer. Before we start the workshop, I want to share a little bit more about who we are and what we do. The Regional Foundation Center has been serving Philly's nonprofit community for almost 50 years. We are a nonprofit resource center at the Free Library of Philadelphia, and we provide access to high-quality research databases, free workshops, and one-on-one research appointments. We are located at the Parkway Central Library on the ground floor within the Business Resource and Innovation Center, or as we like to call it, the BRIC. Our space offers comfortable furniture, free Wi-Fi, and meeting rooms. Currently, we are open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if you're looking for a change of scenery from your home office or cubicle, I hope you'll stop in and say hi. The Regional Foundation Center is part of Candid's Funding Information Network, a network of libraries, community foundations, and nonprofit resource centers across the globe where you can access databases, print materials, and free classes. So what is Candid? Candid is the result of the merger between two organizations, Foundation Center and GuideStar. As leaders in the world of philanthropic data, the merger of these two organizations means even more data is being collected on the philanthropic sector. Candid is the force behind Foundation Directory, the resource we'll be discussing during today's workshop. So upon completion of this training, you should be able to do the following. Explain what Foundation Directory is, identify what your needs are before searching in Foundation Directory, evaluate if those prospects are a good fit for your needs, identify options for accessing Foundation Directory, and get help with Foundation Directory if you need it. Before you start searching for funding opportunities, you must first have a clear idea of the project you want to fund. It'll make your research more focused. Also, you'll get a bigger variety of prospects if you can think of different ways to describe your project. I recommend that nonprofits break their organization down into as many buckets as possible so that you can try to find funders interested in your different buckets. Don't be tempted to skip this step. It's important to be able to articulate what you need funding for before doing your research. So here are 3 questions to help. Who are you serving? Where are they located? And what are you doing for them? For example, here is how an organization providing after-school programs for youth in Philadelphia might answer these questions. For the question, who are you serving? They may be serving youth ages 5 to 12. For the question, where are they located? They may be located in West Philadelphia. And then for the question, what are you doing for them? You can jot down a few sentences or a couple of bullet points. So for our example of the organization providing after-school programs, they're offering a mix of academic programming, recreation, and cultural activities. Your organization may have one project or program you're looking to fund, or you may have several. It's helpful to answer these questions for each program or project. To further help you figure out the best search strategy or search terms to use, we will take a look at Candid's philanthropy classification system. It sounds complicated, but it's really just a list of all the search terms available to you in Foundation Directory. People use different terminology to explain their work. The philanthropy classification system helps ensure everything is categorized with the most appropriate search term and is the same across the board. For example, if your organization provides after-school programming, you won't find the term after-school program in Foundation Directory. Instead, you would use the term out-of-school learning. Another example is faith-based, which doesn't appear in the philanthropy classification system. Instead, you should pick the religion associated with your organization. When identifying your needs, you should think about the following. Subject, which describes what you need support for. You can use these terms to describe your organization as a whole or a specific project. For example, you might use the terms elementary education or clean water supply. Population describes who is being supported or who benefits from your programs and services. For example, veterans or people with disabilities. Support strategy describes how the grant money will support you. For example, are you looking for money for general operating, program development, or do you have a capital project that you want to fund? Geographic focus describes where the work is being done. You always want to include this in your search so that you are identifying funders where you are located. You can search by city, county, region, or state. For example, if the work you're doing is in Philadelphia, you would put in Philadelphia. If you're serving Montgomery County, you could put in Montgomery County. If the work you're doing serves Philadelphia and the surrounding area, then you can use the Delaware Valley region as your geographic focus. A list of all of the search terms as well as definitions can be found at taxonomy.candid.org. So we're going to take a look at the philanthropy classification system so you can see what this looks like. So I'm now on the philanthropy classification system website. Again, the website for that is taxonomy.candid.org. This is a free website that can be accessed from anywhere. So we're going to first start by looking at subjects. So I'm going to click on this subjects tab. From there, we can scroll down and we'll see a list of all the subject terms that we can use when searching Foundation Directory. We start with very broad general categories, but each of these categories can be expanded so that you can find a more specific search term. So for example, if we were going back to our example of that organization providing after-school programs, we can look under the education subject. And then if we look under education services, we'll see out-of-school learning listed as a possible subject term. I can click on any of these subject terms, and the right side of the page here will display a definition of that subject term. So how is Candid defining out-of-school learning? So I recommend taking a look at this list before you even start searching Foundation Directory and make a list of all of the search terms that you want to search for once you're in Foundation Directory. Next, we'll take a look at populations. So I clicked on the populations tab. And for populations, we have things like age groups, ethnic and racial groups, social and economic status. Populations are much more useful to include in your search when a subject term is not available to describe the work that you're doing or who you're serving. So for example, there's not a subject term related to veterans. So you may want, if you're doing work with veterans, you may want to look under the work status and occupation section and use the term veterans. But for our example of the organization providing after-school programming for youth in Philadelphia, you may not necessarily need to include something like children and youth just because it is a little bit redundant. But those categories are there if you would like to include them in your search. And then the last set of search terms we'll take a look at is support strategy. So again, support strategy refers to how you will be using the grant money, how it will support you. Do you need grant money for general operating, for capital and infrastructure, program support, etc.? Do keep in mind that not all funders include this piece of information in their grant details. So I recommend running a search with one of the support strategies most relevant to your organization, but I also recommend running a search without a support strategy as well, just so you can make sure you're covering all of your bases. All right, so let's go back to our example of the after-school program so that we can plug in some search terms from the philanthropy classification system. So returning to that example for the question, who are you serving? We may want to use the search terms students, children, and preteens. For the question, where are they? We can't put a specific neighborhood or zip code in our search, so we'll just put in Philadelphia. And then for the question, what are you doing for them? Here's some of the search terms we could use: out of school learning, arts education, and community recreation. Keep in mind that a lot of nonprofits tend to think of their work in very granular and specific terms, but funders don't always think along the same lines. So you can start by searching for more specific search terms, but then you may also want to look at who's funding broader search terms as well. And remember that building and running a search is only part of the research process. Once you have a list of funders, you should evaluate whether or not they are a good fit for your organization or project needs. You should ask yourself the following questions. Do I meet the funder's requirements? So some funders will explicitly say you need to be operating for X number of years, or you must have a budget that's at least X number of dollars. So you always want to check their requirements and make sure that you meet those requirements. Is my mission or project's goals a priority for this funder? So when you're looking at a funder's profile in Foundation Directory, you want to make note of what their funding priorities are. You can do this by looking at a list of the past grants they've given out and the organizations that they've supported. You also want to ask yourself, how big are the grants this funder is giving out? So you want to make sure you're looking at funders who are going to give the amount of money that you're looking for. So if you're looking for a grant of $50,000 and you find a funder that seems like a great match, but they're only giving out grants of $5,000, then you shouldn't expect to get $50,000 from that funder. You could still ask for $5,000 since that's in line with what they typically give. But again, it will help you manage your expectations if you get a sense of the typical grant size they give out. And as I mentioned before, looking at whether or not the funder has supported similar organizations in the past will give you a really good sense if they would be interested in supporting you. The best indicator of what a funder will fund in the future is what they funded in the past. So in Foundation Directory, you'll be able to look at a list of the past grants that a funder gave out. So you'll be able to see exactly who those grants went to, what the grant money was used for, and how much those grants were awarded for. And then the last question you want to ask yourself is, do I know anyone associated with this funder? So if you have some kind of connection with a funder, it can help you get your foot in the door. So in a funder's profile in Foundation Directory, there is a who's who section that will list out board members and staff members at that foundation. So take a look at that, see if you know anyone there. You can also share that list with your own board members, staff members, volunteers, or other people in your network to see if there are any common connections. Asking these questions for each prospect can help you evaluate whether or not the funder is a good fit. You don't want to waste your time applying with a funder that isn't a good match. One way to learn whether or not a funder will be a good match, or if they care about the same things you care about, is to look at a list of the grants they gave out in the past. Looking at past grants can be a useful way of determining not only who the funder supports, but also how much they typically give out. 990s are the financial documents all nonprofits have to file with the IRS. Most of you likely file one with the IRS each year for your respective organizations. Funders file a different form called 990-PF. The PF stands for Private Foundation. In addition to financial and board information, these documents will also list out all the grants the funder gave out that year. The list of grants is typically found on page 11, but most funders will put "See attached" and add the full list of grants at the end of the document. 990s are where a lot of the data in Foundation Directory is coming from. So if you're using Foundation Directory, you do not need to also look at the 990s. But if you aren't able to access Foundation Directory, looking at a funder's 990 is a great place to quickly find information about past grants they've given out. All 990 PFs and nonprofit 990s are available for free on guidestar.org. While 990s are publicly available documents, there can be a significant lag time between when a foundation files a 990 with the IRS and when that 990 is made publicly available. So if you see that a foundation's most recent 990 is from 2 years ago, for example, that's pretty typical. So once you've thought through your funding needs, you can start to explore Foundation Directory. This robust tool is unsurpassed in its scope, depth, and currency, with over 242,000 funders and almost 25 million previously awarded grants. And it's updated on a daily basis. The data available in Foundation Directory is being pulled from a variety of sources listed here. As I mentioned previously, a lot of the information is coming from funder 990s, but we're also getting information from grantmaker websites, annual reports, and news articles. Direct reporting from grantmakers means that they have the ability to update their profiles and add grant details throughout the year. Grantmakers who do this are known as e-grant reporters. So if a funder is an e-grant reporter, typically that means we're going to see more up-to-date information from them because they're providing information outside of just what's on their 990. So how can you access Foundation Directory? In addition to accessing Foundation Directory through the Regional Foundation Center, there are Fin partners across the globe. So if you find yourself in a new city, you can take a look and see if there is a Fin close to you. You can visit Candid Learning to find the Fin closest to you by putting in your city or zip code. You can also purchase your own subscription to Foundation Directory. The price of a subscription varies depending on which version you choose and whether you want to buy a monthly plan or pay for a 1 or 2 year plan. You can visit fdo.org to learn more about subscription options. And if you want to visit the Regional Foundation Center to access Foundation Directory, you're welcome to come in anytime we're open. No appointment is necessary. We do recommend bringing your own laptop, and once you're connected to our Wi-Fi, you'll be able to access Foundation Directory. We do have a few public computers available for use as well. You can also get free remote access to a pared down version of Foundation Directory called Foundation Directory Essential by participating in Candid's Go for the Gold promotion. So any small nonprofit, which Candid is defining as having a budget of less than $1 million, if they earn a gold seal of transparency on guidestar.org, they can get a free subscription to Foundation Directory Essential. So as I mentioned, this is a pared down version of the professional version that we have available at the Regional Foundation Center. So it will allow you to search for grant makers, but you won't be able to see the past grants they've given out, and you won't be able to see information on the recipients who have received those grants. But it's still a really great resource to start your research and to start to put together a prospect list. So we're going to take a look at how to access Foundation Directory through the Regional Foundation Center, and we're going to do some sample searches so you can all see how to use Foundation Directory. So again, you will need to be on site at the Parkway Central Library in order to access Foundation Directory. Once you're here and connected to our Wi-Fi, you'll go to our homepage, freelibrary.org. From the homepage, in this blue find box, we're going to click on the link that says databases. This will take you to a list of all the databases the Free Library subscribes to. I'm just interested in the ones relevant to nonprofits. So in this filters box, I'm going to change the subject to nonprofit. And then I'm going to click filter results. From there, our nonprofit resources are listed in alphabetical order. So here we have Foundation Directory Professional. So I'll click on that link to take us to the resource. So when you're here at the library using Foundation Directory Professional, you do have to go through each of those steps in order to access Foundation Directory. If you were to just Google foundation directory, it would not log you in properly. You need to access it through the Free Libraries website. I'm now on the homepage for foundation directory. Before we jump into our search, I do want to point out some useful resources. First off, we have this help section. And in this help section, we have a guide, we have FAQs, and we have contact information. So these are great resources to use if you need help while you're using foundation directory. The guide will provide you with some general information about how to use foundation directory. You can click on any of these areas. You'll get tips as well as videos on how to use foundation directory. There's also an FAQ section which you can search. So if you do have a question about one of the features in foundation directory, you can use the FAQ section. It answers most of the questions that people have. You can also chat with somebody at Candid. The chat is available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. if you'd like to chat with somebody live. There's also a contact link there if you want to send them an email. All right, so back to the homepage for foundation directory. In the center of this screen here, we have a quick search. So understanding that not everyone knows about the philanthropy classification system, or that people are used to using Google and using natural language, Candid does offer you a search option where you can type whatever you want to into the search box. And you can see some of the examples here: ballet school in New York City, animal shelter in Portland, Maine, food pantry in Dallas. You're welcome to use this search, but I like to show people the advanced search and filter. So I'm going to click on that link here above the search box. You'll be able to see all the different search options available to you, and this will help you create a more targeted search. So we're going to start with subject area. So again, subject area describes what needs funding, either describing your organization or a specific program or project. When you click in the subject area search box, you'll get a drop-down list of all the search terms that you can choose from. These are the same search terms that are listed in the philanthropy classification system. When you see that little down arrow, that means there's additional search terms within that larger category. So I'm going to go to education and then education services, and I'm going to choose out of school learning for my search. If you would like to include multiple search terms in your search, you can do that. So if I added a second search term, so for example, reading promotion, once that second search term is added, you'll see this option appear: match any or match all. So if we left this as match any, it would give us a list of funders interested in any of these search terms. If we change it to match all, it would give us a list of funders interested in all of these search terms. So doing a match all search, you're going to get less results because it's going to be a more specific search. If you did match any, you're going to get a lot more search options because it's a broader search. So I'm just going to stick with out of school learning for right now. So I'll remove reading promotion. Next, we'll do geographic focus. And for this search box, you can just start typing in your geographic focus. So for example, Philadelphia. The county and the city both show up. They're the same, so it doesn't matter which one you choose. So I'll add in Philadelphia. Next, we have population served. So again, this can be really useful if you're working with a specific population that is not represented in one of those subject area search terms. But again, if you are, if we're doing something like out of school learning, it's probably a little bit redundant to include children and youth or students. So for our purposes today, I'm going to leave population served blank. So these are the three search boxes: subject area, geographic focus, and population served, that you would use to do a general search to find funders interested in funding the work your organization does. These next three boxes can be useful for other reasons. So organization name allows you to look up a specific organization, either a funder or another nonprofit organization. So if somebody suggested to you, you should look into the Philadelphia Foundation. They may want to fund you. You could type their name into the search box. I just want to look at grant makers, so I would choose grant makers only. I'm going to look for the grant maker here in Philadelphia, and then I could click on this arrow to be taken directly to their profile. You can also use organization name to search for another nonprofit organization. So if there's an organization that's doing similar work to you, or if you want to see who's funded them in the past, you can look up an organization and then you'll be able to see a list of all the grants they've received in the past and who's funded them. I do not recommend using location. Location is just tied to where a grant maker is physically based. So for example, if we put in our location as Philadelphia, but there's a funder out there who is based in New York and is interested in funding out of school learning in Philadelphia, that New York funder will not show up on our list because they're not located in Philadelphia. There are plenty of funders who will fund Philadelphia who are not located here. So again, I recommend leaving location blank. And then I talked earlier about how you can find information about people associated with foundations in Foundation Directory. So if there's somebody who you think might serve on a board or be a staff member at a foundation, but you don't know what organization they're associated with, you can try searching their name in the Who's Who box. Under additional filters, I want to point out a few other search options. So first, this is where you'll find support strategy. So if you did want to include funders who are interested in providing a specific type of support, this is where you would add that to your search. We also have these two slider bars here. These can also help you build your search. So the grant amount allows you to set parameters around the size of grants that a funder has given out. So if you're only interested in grants that are at least $50,000, for example, you can put that in as your kind of bottom line. You can also set it as a range to be less than a certain amount. So if you're looking for smaller grants, you could put the high end at $25,000. This next slider bar is years. So the data in here goes back to 2003. So what that means is if a funder gave a grant for out of school learning in Philadelphia in 2003, they're going to show up in our search results. But that was 20 years ago now. So that funder may not be around anymore. They may have changed their giving priorities. Either way, we may want to look at more current information. As I mentioned before, you do want to keep in mind that because we're relying on those 990 PFs for a lot of the data in here, if you go too current, you may filter out funders who are interested in supporting your organization. So I recommend looking at about 10 years worth of information. So I'm going to put in 2013 as my range. So we're going to be looking at about 10 years worth of data. So these other search boxes, we don't really have to worry about for our purposes today. Again, subject area and geographic focus are the two most important things to include in your search, but you do have some other options here if you want to build your search in a different way. All right, so I'm going to click search and then we'll talk through our search results. So our search results are given to us in three formats: grant makers, grants, and recipients. So there are 170 grant makers interested in funding out of school learning in Philadelphia. In the past, they've given out 549 grants, and those grants went to 112 recipients or 112 nonprofit organizations. We're going to start by looking at the grant makers. So the first 5 grant makers that meet our search criteria are listed here. But I recommend clicking this blue View All button to see the full list and access some other options. Once we've clicked View All, we'll then have this Grant Makers Filters box appear. And within this box, we have the option to exclude grant makers that are not accepting applications. Now, that doesn't mean that they had a specific deadline like January 31st, and that's now passed. It just means that they either pre-select who they're giving to, or it's by invitation only. So I always like to remind nonprofits that it doesn't mean that those funders are never going to give to your organization, but it means you have to approach them differently. You're not going to send them a grant proposal like you would to a funder that does take open grant applications. Instead, you can try sending them a letter of introduction or taking a look at their board and staff and seeing if you have any connections there. But if you do want to exclude them from your search, you can check that box. The list will be refreshed, and you can see that we now have 76 grant makers on our search results list. So I will explain the information on the list here and how it's sorted, and then we'll take a look at a funder's profile. So we have the grant maker's name, the city and state where they're located. The next two numbers are their total assets and total giving. So those numbers are coming from the most recent 990 we have on record and represents 1 year's worth of financial data for that funder. Essentially, how much money did they have? How much money did they give away? A lot of people don't realize that foundations are required by the IRS to give away at least 5% of their prior year's assets. So what that means is foundations must give away their money. What's really more relevant to us, though, are these next two columns, amount funded and grant count. Those numbers are telling us how many grants and how many grant dollars went to our specific search. So between 2013 and 2023, the Philadelphia Foundation gave out 41 grants totaling $335,000 for out-of-school learning in Philadelphia. So this list is sorted by grant count. So the funders that have given the most grants are at the top, and then it descends down from there. But keep in mind, some of them may have given away more money, in which case this is telling us that those funders are probably giving larger grants. So I'm going to open up a funder's profile. I'm going to take a look at the Philadelphia Foundation, and we'll take a look and see what information is available for each funder. So the first thing I want to note are these two dates at the top of the page. The first one is telling us when their profile was last updated, and the second one is telling us when their grant information was last updated. So those dates will give you a sense of how current the information is. The next section of a funder's profile is their last 5 years of giving at a glance. So this is going to give us a general overview of what they supported in the last 5 years. So we can see the top 10 subject areas they've supported and how much money went to these different subject areas. So if your organization kind of falls into a number of different buckets, you may want to take a look at this and see how many things you have in common with this funder. You can also click on this View Each Subject with More Detail button, and then you can do a deeper dive so you can see exactly how much money went to the specific search term you search for. So I'm drilling down to find out-of-school learning, which we can see here. In the last 5 years, they've given a little over $450,000 to. The next chart is showing us where this money is going. So typically with local funders that are based in Philadelphia or the Philadelphia area, a lot of their grants and grant dollars are going to Pennsylvania. But if you're looking at a funder that is not based in Pennsylvania or who gives nationally, you want to make sure to look and see how interested they've been in Pennsylvania in the last 5 years. This last chart is going to help us start to figure out what the typical grant size is that this funder gives out. You'll be able to see how many grants in the last 5 years they've given out in these different dollar amount ranges. From there, you'll want to take a look at the next section of the profile, the grant section. This is going to tell you the most common grant amount for our specific search. So again, out of school learning in Philadelphia, tends to get around $2,000 from the Philadelphia Foundation. We can then see a list of all of those grants they've given out. So we can see who received the grant, the primary subject of the grant, the year it was given, and then the dollar amount of the grant. You can click on the name of the recipient. A new tab will open up and it will provide you with details about this specific grant. So we'll provide a description. So sometimes it will say things like general operating support. Other times it will tell you the specific program or project that the grant money supported. So this particular grant went to the Music Corps after school program for 2018-2019. In addition to being tagged as out of school learning, the subject term elementary and secondary education was used to describe it, and the population group served were students. And the support strategy was program support. So these grant details can really give you a better sense of what this funder actually supported. So saying that they support out of school learning is useful, but in reality, who did those grant dollars go to? What was that money used for? And that's what you can find in these grant details. And if you'd like to learn more about the recipient of this grant, so Rock to the Future in our example here, you can click on their name and take a look at their profile. You'll also notice sometimes recipients will have a little box next to them that says platinum, gold, silver, or bronze. That's letting you know what seal of transparency they've earned in GuideStar. So if you see that a funder tends to support organizations that have some kind of seal of transparency, and your organization does not have a seal of transparency, that's kind of a good nudge for you to claim and update your organization's GuideStar profile. Now, another thing we can take a look at from the grant section here is a list of all the grants that this funder has given out. So we can clear our search filters by clicking this clear button. It will refresh the list, and then we'll get a list of all of the grants this funder has given out, regardless of subject area. So this is a great way to see what else this funder is supporting beyond what we search for, beyond out of school learning. And you can restore those filters by hitting restore. The next section of the funder's profile is their funding interest. So these are all the different subjects, population groups, support strategies, et cetera, that this funder is interested in supporting. The related organizations section will let you know any other organizations that this funder is connected to. The about section gives you some background information about the funder, mission statement about the funder. If they have specific program areas, they'll be listed out here as well. Next, we'll have other funders to consider. So based on similar patterns of giving, these funders may also want to support you, and you can click on any of their names to look at their profiles. Next, we have the application section. So this will give you more information about how to apply for a grant with this funder, any specific documents that they require, deadlines, that type of information. The next section is financials, and the financial section is where you'll find the funder's past 990s if you did want to take a look at those. We then have the who's who section. So this is where you'll find the people associated with this particular foundation, board members and staff members. So again, this can be really useful to see if you have any common connections with anyone at that foundation. Next, we have communications. This will list out any philanthropic news articles about the funder, press releases, social media pages. This section is a really great way to see what is currently out there about this particular funder. The next section is Issue Lab, which will list any research papers that this funder has been associated with. And then at the bottom is contact information for the funder. So we'll have their address. If there's a specific contact person, they'll be listed there, email address, phone number, and then the funder's website. So I always recommend checking the funder's website for the most up-to-date information, but do keep in mind that only about 10% of foundations have websites. So that's why Foundation Directory can be so useful. It can start you on the path to building that prospect list for you, and then you can do a little bit of a deeper dive into that foundation. Now, if this is a foundation that you're interested in kind of returning to, or you'd like to export the information, you can do that a couple of ways. So if we go back to the top of the page, so if I click the back button on our browser and go back to the list of our grant makers, if we would like to export information from here, we can do that by doing individual profiles or a batch of profiles. So you can check the boxes next to the funders whose profile you're interested in downloading. You can do up to 10 at a time. And then from there, you want to look for this tools box. And then you can either download a PDF version of these profiles and save them to your own computer, or you can email yourself a PDF of these profiles. Either way, once you click on the option that you want to make sure you're choosing Save Profiles. That will then generate one PDF with all the profiles in that one PDF. Once that's saved on your computer, you can access that from anywhere. You do not need to be in the library to look at it. Just make sure it gets saved to your computer. All right, so let's take a look at the other sets of search results that we got. So I'm just hitting the back button on my browser here. So we took a look at grant makers. Let's next look at the list of grants. So the grant section here is just kind of a master list of all the grants that have been given out that meet our search criteria. So each of these lines represents an individual grant that was given out. And we can see who gave the grant, who received the grant, where the organization is located, the primary subject of the grant, the year it was given, and then the dollar amount of the grant. This list is sorted by year given, so we are seeing the most recent grants at the top. We can click on either the name of the grant maker or the name of the recipient, and then we'll be able to see the grant details for that specific grant. So again, we can see a description of what the grant money was used for, the subjects and population groups associated with that grant. And if we wanted to learn more about the grant maker, we could click on their name. If we wanted to learn more about the recipient, we could click on their name. And then our last section of search results is going to be recipients. And recipients are a list of the nonprofit organizations that received grants. So you might want to think of these as your friendly competitors. These are organizations that are also receiving grants for the work that you're doing. So it can be helpful to look at who they are and see who's funding them. So with this list, we have the name of the recipient and where they're located, the total dollar value of the grants they've received, and the number of grants they've received for our specific search. So for example, if Philadelphia Futures received a grant that was not categorized as out of school learning, it would not show up in these numbers here. So keep in mind, this is not a total dollar amount or grant count for all the grants they've received necessarily. And when you click on the name of a recipient, you're taken to their profile. You'll be able to see a little bit more information about who's funding them. So this first chart is telling us the types of organizations giving to them. So the majority of their grant dollars are coming from independent foundations, followed by corporate funders. We also have public charities in there, community foundations, and other. So for example, if you see a similar organization that's getting a lot of grant dollars from corporate funders, but you've never engaged with corporate funders before, this may be an indication that you should look more into engaging with corporate funders. This next chart will give you a sense of whether their funders are local, in the same state, or in the same region. So again, it will give you a sense of whether maybe you should be focusing your efforts on local funders versus funders in other parts of the country. And then this last chart is going to show you how many grants this organization received in the different dollar amount ranges. So I think this is really useful to look at because I think a lot of nonprofits think other nonprofits are only receiving large grants, but you'll see that that's not the case. This nonprofit has received a lot of grants that are less than $5,000. Next, you'll be able to look at a list of all the grants that this nonprofit has received, and you can see who gave the grant, the primary subject of the grant, the year given, and the dollar amount of the grant. You can click on the name of the grant maker to learn more about that specific grant they received. This next section, funding interests, are the subjects that they typically receive grants for. So in this case, education and secondary education. And the populations they're serving are adolescents and low-income people. So if you're struggling to figure out the best search terms to use in Foundation Directory, look at the profile of a similar organization and take a look at the subjects they're receiving grants for, either in this funding interest section or in the list of grants that they're receiving. Also included in a recipient's profile is their 990s. So if you'd like to take a look at any of their 990s, those are available. And then at the bottom is contact information for the nonprofit. So where they're located, as well as a website if you'd like to learn more about them. So that is how you search Foundation Directory and look through your search results based on the grant makers that are interested in supporting your search, the grants they've given out in the past, and the recipients who have received those grants. So before we wrap up for today, I do want to show you one really useful website for all nonprofits, and that is the Candid Learning website, which you can access by going to learning.candid.org. So this is Candid's website for nonprofits. It has information on training opportunities, it has sample documents, blog posts, and a knowledge base, so lots of really great information for all things related to nonprofits. So under the training section, you can see a list of upcoming trainings that are available online. They also have a number of self-paced workshops as well that you can take. If there's a specific topic you're interested in, you can jump to that section and read articles, see videos, and books associated with that topic. Under resources, I want to highlight the knowledge base, which is kind of like an FAQ section. So if there's a question you need answered, there's a good chance the knowledge base has an answer for you. There's also sample documents included on Candid Learning. So if you'd like to see what a good grant proposal looks like, you can download a successful grant proposal and read through what that looks like. Under the Find Us section, this is where you can find a funding information network partner closest to you if you're not in the Philadelphia area. All right, so let's wrap up for today. So as I mentioned before, if you are in need of help with Foundation Directory, you can definitely take a look at that FD Foundation Directory quick guide that is listed in Foundation Directory. There's also lots of great YouTube videos on the Candid YouTube channel. You can always get help from library staff at the Regional Foundation Center, or you can use the chat or email feature on either Candid Learning or Foundation Directory if you'd like to reach out to Candid staff directly. So I already showed you Candid Learning, again, a really great kind of one-stop shop resource for all things related to nonprofits. And then if you are interested in building your knowledge beyond Foundation Directory, we recommend taking these classes provided through Candid Learning, Introduction to Fundraising Planning and Introduction to finding grants. So thank you so much for watching Introduction to Foundation Directory. Please feel free to reach out to the Regional Foundation if you have any questions, and be sure to check out the link in the description of this video for additional resources. Hopefully we'll see you at the Regional Foundation Center. Thanks so much for joining us today.